Hello everyone, welcome back. 41 CM 204. I'm Josh.
This is Mindy.
This is Mindy.
Hi, nice to see you again.
Today we join you from Block D.
Finally, after all this time, we've been away for a while. We've been mostly setting up in Block A recently, but now here we are. We have our shoring up in Block D, and so we're back at D. So we're here to show you what we found so far.
Right. So updates since our last video. Well, real quickly, I want everyone to make sure to like us, send us some comments out here. We're out here for you, so please follow through with your job. Anyway, so updates since last video. Block A, the units are getting down to about 1.5 meters or so. Still in burn rock mecca over there. Keep finding more and more burn rock features in different zones and layers as we go down. We're probably up to at least 3 different burned rock events that we can tell so far, meaning late archaic to early late archaic and late middle archaic so far. We're going to keep going down there as we progress. We'll probably be back over there. I feel like everybody's got a good dose of Block A over the last couple weeks, so we'll probably won't be over there for a while for the video segment. But feature density is finally starting to go down. They're getting smaller and smaller, which is as you would kind of suspect and what we think would happen, and it's starting to show that, so that's good. We're actually, interesting enough, there more and more faunal remains are starting to come out the deeper we go. I don't know if it's a preservation thing to this point, but it's kind of a cool thing that we're going to keep our eye on.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's what we got for A, and I'm going to turn Block C over to Mindy.
So,
over here.
All right, so we'll move up the camera here. Hi. Block C has been closed pretty much since the holiday break. We've been having a tremendous amount of problems with it, but we finally managed to design a contraption to cover Block C and to cover the entire thing, including the berms around, to keep the water off. So if you want to sort of look down, you'll see this little white dome thing. It's made with PVC pipe and one very, very, very large white tarp over the entire thing. And hopefully it will survive all the wind and the rain and all the other sort of problems that have been having, Block C's been having. A couple weeks ago we did have a pipe burst right next to the block, and the water was kind of seeping in and percolating out. NBU got to it right away and managed to plug the leak, and so the soil fortunately is drying out. It's still a little bit muddy in that section, so we're not going to go back there right away. So we're going to just kind of move to the drier areas of the block, and already we're uncovering more burned rock. It's kind of the way things go in Block C. So hopefully by the next week we'll have quite a bit more open that you guys can take a look at. So that's how that's going.
So Mindy, did you go into, that was built 100% and designed by Mindy by hand, by herself. And she's taking patents on it right now for anybody out in the archaeological community. That will be for sale soon, probably for a low price of around $699.99. So
Yeah,
talk
right.
to Mindy about it. But we'll see if it works. It's looking good so far.
So far, yeah, we gotta wait for our first really big rainstorm and see if it holds up. But
so yeah, it was
crossing
great.
our fingers. Yep.
Which finally brings us to Block D, and as you can see, I'm standing on the ladder here, and we are approximately about 2.5 meters below surface down here. This man joining me right here is Jason Perez. He has pretty much hand dug this out by himself. We installed some shoring in here to help it make safe and be compliant with our standards out here. As you can see, it's a deep, deep hole, and interestingly enough, we have a very small, at this point, a very small burned rock feature. We just hit it at the end of the day yesterday, and so Jason and Noel this morning have been sort of digging it out as we go. We're going to hope to expose some more, but as you can see, it's really cool that it's that deep. No idea how old it is at this point. We haven't gotten any diagnostics or anything with it, but based on where it is in the soil, you're probably looking at somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 years old minimum. So. So that's pretty cool.
And the artifact density, it hasn't really increased a lot at this juncture.
So we're hoping that we'll be able to sort of have more artifacts pop out so we can identify what that feature is. But right now it's just kind of a collection of rocks, and we'll have to explore a little bit more and see what we can turn it out. But the thing is that it turned up after layers and layers and layers and layers of very sterile soil that had almost no cultural material in it at all.
Right. So it's probably an indication that this has been flooded over many, many times, which, you know, we suspect on any, you know, Central Texas kind of floodplain type of site. So that's kind of what you're dealing with. And what you have here is a beautiful display of stratigraphy, starting from the top of our native soil deposits here, continuing all the way down. This right here is approximately how far is it? 1.78 meters. Approximately, you know, so in U.S. Measuring system, that's roughly about 5 feet. So it's pretty sweet looking. And as you can see, digging this deep has kind of some challenges. Noel here has been sort of our tripod setup we rigged up. This is how we kind of have to get the buckets out of here.
Our bucket system.
Very, you know, slowly. We are very, very deep at this point right now, but we're going to hope to continue down at least another 1.5 to 2 feet to see if we can get into our coveted Paleo-Indian.
Where we're hoping that we'll be able to sort of get to another occupation surface that's even further down below this.
But so yeah, that about wraps it up for us over here for our update. I'm going to let Mindy take you over to Mason, who's got a very interesting topic set up for archaeologists love their layer cake.
So why don't you follow me? We're kind of going through. We've got a little pop-up just because there's a chance of some sprinkly rain today. And we're going to walk over here right now. Just to orient everybody, Leaders Creek is right off to my right, just past this little pond. The spring, Comal Spring, is behind us. Walking kind of on the southerly side of our site, and here's Mason. Hey, man.
Hello. Hi, everybody. It's me. It's Mason.
Hi, Mason.
Hi, Josh. Hi, Mindy. Hello, viewers. So today I thought we would talk a little bit about why we're digging here and not digging up there. Lauren, if you can just, there's a big nice bluff up there. Clearly a lot of people like to live up there.
Yeah. You see the houses at the top, those are
Sort of sitting on top of
The escarpment.
The escarpment. Yeah, so they're essentially, we have two different landforms here. We have a high cliff face essentially on that side, and then over here on this side we have a lowland, which is a floodplain. And the reason why we're digging over on this side and not up there, first off, the project is here, but also because the information potential is much better on this side than over there on that side. And so I wanted to kind of use this deep dive to kind of cover why that is. And the source of that is, especially in this area, is actually flooding. This area here is kind of flood prone, and every time that there's a flood, here's an example from this is from 1972, the Herald Zeitung. This is the newspaper for here in New Braunfels. The caretaker's house, the person who used to run and manage the buildings over here and run the waterworks, lived on the property over on that side. And then in 1972, there was a flood in Bleeders Creek that carried away the house.
Kit and caboodle.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
And so flooding is pretty common. And from our perspective, flooding is often viewed as kind of destructive, but it can actually be, for archaeologists, it's a beautifully preservative thing because it creates layers of soil that protect sites. So I have Josh and Mindy here to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. Let's assume that on both sides of this landform, we have a high cliff over here, that's an upland, and then we have a lowland over here, and then a river running through the middle. That people are living equally on both sides of the land, and they have, as they're living here, they're using all different types of artifacts. We have stone tools and plant materials and faunal remains like bones, and we have hearths, rocks and charcoal from hearths, and then in later occupations there's some ceramics. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you why this is the way it works the way it does. So Mindy can be the upland people, Josh can be the lowland people with the dog. I borrowed my son's Legos and he said it was okay, so we're going to just go with this. So go ahead and kind of live there and set up some sort of like an occupation site that you might live on, both of you.
These guys have an awesome campfire that they're just hanging out and roasting ancient marshmallows here on the campsite. And here they're going to make some stone tools like that around. And then after they eat their dinner, they're going to throw the bones away like that.
And these are kind of representative of what we've seen out here. I know we talked a little bit earlier at Block A about our burned rock features. That's kind of, I mean, in a very, 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 very basic way, this is kind of the same things that we're seeing.
Okay.
A burned rock feature with some faunal remains, plant material, stone tools spattered around it.
Yep. Okay.
So let's assume that some time has passed. These people have long gone.
We get up.
Josh, move your people out of the way unless you want them to get washed away in a flood. And the flood comes through, and this side stays the same, and then this side gets a fresh layer of dirt deposited on the top, like that.
From a flood.
Okay. From a flood, because that's all just mud. That's all mud that's been carried in the floodwaters. And now someone else comes along, and they live on the same spot now. And they do their own thing. What might that be?
Well, right now they're going to be kicking around the stuff that was there before, and then they're going to set up over here in a new spot. That's what they're going to do.
They're going to set up, yeah. So go ahead and Josh has a hearth going over here, or some sort, maybe a burned rock midden or something like that.
A couple more.
There you go.
A little bit more plant material.
Yeah, keep the middens are tough.
The middens
maybe
are
how
tough.
about here, Josh?
Yeah.
Let's say that they're actually processing some plant materials too. Oh, look, it's all washing away. Oh, there we go.
Surprise, surprise.
So ignoring the plants that have washed into the river.
Actually, that probably happened.
That does happen. So let's say another 1,000 years goes by. These people leave,
Da, 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 da.
and then another flood comes through, and it deposits another thick layer of soil. Meanwhile, this side stays the same.
Exactly the same.
And so
The
go
only
ahead
way,
and we'll do one more kind of occupation just to sort of give the idea.
Da, da, da.
And so, yeah, and let's say this time it's a later occupation with maybe they have some ceramics in place.
Okay. Got it.
Just to mix it up a little bit.
Stone tools. And then a little bit of ceramics over here. So pretty much the way on this side the way that things get moved around is exactly the way it's getting moved around right now. Mostly wind action is what sort of moves these things around. And sort of people kind of walking across and sort of messing things up with later occupations. But pretty much that's how things go. Oh, I got them to stand up. Hooray.
There we go.
Hooray.
So then we'll move these people out of the way. And so archaeologists come along, and let's say, several thousand years later, and they come to this spot and they decide that they're going to start excavating. They found this archaeological site on both sides. And what you have here is over on this side. Do you have any idea what's going on or what happened in this location? You have a general idea. You have that they had some animals that they were hunting, and there were some ceramics and some tools.
Yeah,
and
so they know that you know basic activities that they were doing. They were cooking, and they were making stone tools, and they were hunting. They were doing some plant processing. But other than that, you have no idea where they were doing it or what all the time periods are all smushed on top of each other.
They're all smushed together. But archaeologists who set up excavation blocks, they're essentially peeling back layers one at a time. And so what they do is they'll peel back a soil layer, one, and then they'll peel back and there might have been stuff in here or maybe not. And then they'll peel back another, and all of a sudden you have a discrete occupation in place. And you have specific information about what was going on at this exact location, whereas over here it's a complete jumbled mess, you have no idea. But here you start to understand what's going on or what sort of activities were happening in this specific time. And then as you peel back another layer, which we'll do here and hopefully not put a whole bunch of stuff everywhere, you've got another layer with new patterns of occupation and new patterns of resource use and things like that. And what we get as a result of this is you start to see, you can find changes in those patterns, you can find all kinds of new information that can give you much better insights into the people who are living in this location through time. And so then you could peel back another layer and get a completely different occupation with completely different resources and patterning, and then you just get a much better picture. And so floodplains are great, and then we have actually as an example here, kind of like a cooking show. We prepared one beforehand if you watch here, you have a pattern that was left, and no one really was here to see that. Well, we were, but you guys weren't. And so you could kind of look at this and sort of see that, wow, this must be some sort of a hearth feature or a large midden, where maybe this was an animal processing area over here, because you have all the bones are all clustered together over here, and maybe they were doing some tool reductions in this location. You get much better insights as a result of the preservative powers of flooding and floodplains. And it's not the only way that this sort of soil formation happens, but it is the primary way that this soil formation is happening in this location. You could go to Rome, and Rome is the earlier layers of occupations in Rome are way down there because of just people
just
creating
built on top of each
soil,
other.
essentially.
Yeah.
And but here it's mostly because of flooding and the depositing the soil.
And to chime in here real quick to piggyback onto what Mason's saying, we were just over in Block D, and you can see how deep Jason's going. Jason is in the process of peeling back those layers, and he's doing exactly what Mason showed by peeling them back and looking for discrete occupations as we go deeper, deeper, and deeper down into the soil column.
The other really great thing about studying cultural material in floodplain is we talk a lot about artifact identification, and particularly projectile point forms, or point forms and things like that. The way that we can sort of figure out what point forms come before and after each other is through identifying them in processes like these, stacked up on top of each other, and that's how we can sort of identify where, sort of, at what level, what stage those projectile points are in fashion. And it's simultaneously a fashion and a function. It's a utilitarian thing, but there's some fashion as well. And so people kind of liked to do things this certain way at a certain time period. Studying this is how we figure out how that all stacks together. Perfect. So you can even see posters of it. So all those archaeology projectile point posters, and they have them all kind of layered on top of each other. This is how we figure out how all that gets done.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It's called stratigraphic context, and that's what you look for, is looking for discrete occupations like Mason referred to, or single-use occupations, to basically isolate out what groups of people are using what different types of tools, what kind of food they're processing, and you get a whole wealth of information. It's one of the greatest tools that we have, because we may figure out that bison became extinct around X time period, 6,000 years ago, but we dig down deep enough, we find bison in some of our stuff. Okay, wow, we know this site is at least that old, if not older. Mm-hmm. So it's a great tool that we use. So.
Yay!
Okay.
All right. Well, that's the main topic.
Our show and tell.
Yes. So you guys can handle the.
Yeah, and TV land.
Or I
Does
can
anybody
answer
out
too.
there have any questions for us out in TV land today, Lauren?
No questions.
No questions.
No questions. Darn it.
Wow, guys,
Okay.
you gotta get with it. Come on. But we do have a couple sample questions though, and one pretty applicable one is are all sites found on floodplains like this? And very easy answer to that is no, they are not. We find them most commonly on floodplains because a lot of that has to do with where work is happening. So, for example, out here, the Headwaters is being constructed, right? As we speak, and sometimes. And as a result, they're building next to a water because that's where the property is. And so by happenstance, there's a floodplain here. So that's what we're digging through and looking at. But a lot of times, for example, when you get out to West Texas, you do a lot of oil and gas development out there. And out there, that's not so much of a floodplain. Everything's kind of more on the surface, kind of along mesa tops and stuff like that, that Mindy, was referring to earlier. So you get a lot of different types of sites. The floodplain ones are, by and large, tend to give you a little bit better understanding sometimes of the archaeological resources.
And I would add that I would be shocked if there aren't archaeological sites up there on that side.
I'm sure that there are.
Or maybe there were, but the difference is those sites have been, in all likelihood, even if they're still present, they've been exposed to the elements and progressive groups of people coming in and shifting things around, and we're just not going to learn nearly as much from sites up on that side than we would from sites over here in this floodplain.
Yeah, that's just using the tools that you have to work with. So.
Any other questions?
I guess the other one we have is how do we know that the site was here? And we've touched on that in previous episodes a little bit, but for example, you know, there's water here, so there's a pretty good indication that people were here, because if there's water here, their chances are there were wild animals here, and if wild animals are here, people are probably going to be here. So those three things kind of all work in unison to kind of give you a pretty good idea. The key for us as archaeologists is to figure out exactly where they were on the landform, and that, you know, that's a topic for another debate. There's many ways that we use to make those determinations.
Okay, and we've got a couple questions. The first one is somebody lives in an older neighborhood and they're curious what they can find out about their own backyard.
It depends on the neighborhood, actually.
Where are they?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Doesn't
that.
Maybe
say.
they'll answer. Well, maybe they don't want to answer.
They
but
might have.
feel free to chime in if you're watching.
They might have better luck finding more historic age stuff especially if it's an older neighborhood, than prehistoric stuff. And if they are close to a water source, then there might be some prehistoric material, sort of either on these sort of benches past the water channel. There might be a prehistoric material there, but to be honest, like the most expedient material to find, especially if it's an older neighborhood and it's in your own backyard, is historic age stuff. So stuff from the turn of the century or even earlier. And believe it or not, we look at stuff we're focusing a lot on prehistoric material because this is predominantly a prehistoric site, but archaeologists look at stuff all the way up to 50 years old. So as people are alive longer than 50 years.
Yes.
Some
of us are rapidly approaching archaeological age.
Yes, we are archaeological age. Yes. And so we look at things that is, all the way up to the 1960s. We look at cultural material to see if it sort of adds to our knowledge of history. So you can look at things not just stuff, from the 18th century or 19th century, but stuff that's even bleeds into the 20th century as well. That can be cultural material that's archaeological.
Okay. And then question about Block D. How much more soil depth do you think before you reach limestone bedrock? Any ideas?
Oh gosh,
or
aren't we going to hit the water table
So
before
I
we
think,
hit that?
I think just because of Block D is located where it is, we're really close to the river channel over there and the creek channel over here. So as you go, as you get closer to the channel, you dip down like this. And so my guess is the bedrock, we won't hit it because it's probably way deeper than what we're going to hit. What we're going to encounter first that's going to probably hinder our excavations over there are two things. One is what we call the saturation zone, which is basically where the water table fluctuates up and down, whereas the water table is essentially where the groundwater is currently located. And since we're close to the creek, it's relatively high for over here. But we'll hit the saturation zone, and when we hit that, that's going to turn the soil into almost like a pasty type of glue. So when you get to that depth, it's really hard to excavate and to be able to make a determination on that. And continuing through the saturation zone, that's a really strong indicator that you're very close to the water table. And when you get to the water table, that makes it.
That's it.
That's game over. So.
Yeah, it is. It's game over. The only way to do it, the only way to excavate past that point is. We were just talking about the LaBelle yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
The LaBelle excavations off the Texas coast, and they had to build what's called a cofferdam.
Shipwreck.
It's a shipwreck, yeah. They had to build a cofferdam, which is basically a giant retaining wall, and they pumped out all the water, and then they let it dry out before they could go and excavate out that shipwreck.
Because the ocean was surrounding
them on all sides, and so so that is LaBelle is a very significantly historic shipwreck. So they managed to be able to get the funding to be able to build that cofferdam, but that's an expensive process, and not a lot of people can go through that. So.
And then a question about stratigraphy. How does relative dating work in layers of stratigraphy?
How does and
Relative
Lauren's
dating.
looking at me.
I can't help with that one.
So actually, we talked a little bit about relative dating in one of the earlier videos. If you search on the YouTube channel for the dating game episode, we talk all about the different ways that we use dating and how we do it. But relative dating is exactly kind of what the name implies. It doesn't mean dating a cousin. It means that you're, sorry, I had to do it. It means that you are dating relative to something else. And so the way that that works is you know ages of different layers of soil. If we were to use this site as an example, you would know that through what's called the Law of Superposition, which is the law that says that soils are deposited and sites are created going upwards as a rule. And so the stuff at the bottom is going to be the oldest, kind of like a clothes pile, a dirty clothes pile. The stuff that you throw down first after you've done your laundry is going to be the oldest. And then as you go up, and so that's a form of relative dating right there, is you essentially know, well, the stuff on the bottom I threw in on a Monday, and then this pile is all the way at the top by Friday. And so you know, well, about a seventh of the way through is probably from Thursday, and then Wednesday, and da-da-da-da-da as you go on down. So relative dating works by having reference points that you know of, date-wise or age-wise, or even approximate ranges, and then you interpolate the space between those reference points that you know. And that's essentially what relative dating is and how it works. And you use reference points from other sites, from you could use it from radiocarbon dates that you get from different deposits in a site, or different types of tools that you find, and then you just sort of connect the dots between them by just estimating the ages, and that's how that process works.
Okay, and then we have a couple questions from Matt about finds during the excavation. What's the most interesting or surprising find? And then if there's any particular thing or artifact that you're expecting to discover with more frequency than anything else?
Which artifacts are we going to find more? Well, I mean, hands down, it's lithic debris is the number one thing that we find, and because it's the thing that survives.
It's rock.
It's rock.
Yeah.
It survives decomposition. So that's going to be. I mean, if you're going to scale, like lithic material versus bone versus
Faunal material.
versus other faunal material. Ceramics or something like lithic is going to be like this. I mean, there's just so much of it.
It doesn't
Yeah,
break down into
we could
material.
probably set up a bowl that's like a cereal bowl, and that would be the relative, and then this would be like a teeny tiny one, and this would be,
this
in terms of how much stuff we get out of this excavation.
Yep. And of the lithic debris, only a small percentage of those are actual tools or tool fragments that people have either used or partially used or attempted to use or were in the process of making and it broke, then tossed it aside. Of those, the biggest thing we find are projectile points. Those are, it's like of all the stone tools we find, projectile points, either spear points or arrowhead points, depending on the time, is what we find. And then we find the sort of other tools, woodworking tools, scrapers, and
funnel treatment, like
awls,
skinning tools, stuff like
or
that.
something like that. And even more rare are bone tools, like using pieces of bone that have been incised or they've been worked into.
Have we had any of those?
And that's not because that they're not
No.
using them. That's simply because they don't preserve
They
as
don't
well.
preserve very
Whereas
well.
pretty
Yeah.
much
Okay.
all the lithic tools are going to preserve, whereas a lot of the organic material, stuff made of plants or bone, that's
Yeah,
that's
like
the first stuff we got.
basketry, for example. That we have only a glimpse as to how long basketry has been in the archaeological record, because the only place that we find those things are very specific locations, dry caves or sort of other areas where the environment will preserve organic material. They could have had basketry out here and we wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, those are great questions. We like it.
And then the most surprising find?
Surprising.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
I would say for us, it's probably the level of preservation that we've seen with our faunal remains. Sites you know, we're looking at 2 to 3 to 4,000 years old at least into a lot of the stuff that we're looking at, and some of the bone is perfectly preserved.
So
And
you know, little
and
pieces of jawbone.
Yeah, teeth.
Josh just found some teeth earlier
yeah,
this
like
week.
the roots. So, I mean,
And-
it's all there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's probably the most surprising. I wouldn't call it the most surprising find, but a surprising aspect to what we're doing out here. What we're really hoping for is the paleo stuff. We haven't found any of that yet. That would be, I wouldn't call it surprising, but it would be very welcome surprise.
Yeah.
It would
Yes,
be
it
kind of, it would put a spring in everyone's step, I
Yes,
think, in
I
terms
think it
of
would.
the vigor for the findings.
But yeah, again, guys,
Yeah.
great questions. We appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks for the questions,
keep 'em
everyone.
coming.
That's wonderful.
You
Yeah,
know,
if
post-
you're in town and you want to see how many lithic tools are found every day, or find some lithic flakes of yourself, we'll have tours tomorrow at 2 and Saturday at 10 and 2. So come by and
Sign up.
see everything for yourself.
Come out.
Yeah.
See us.
be sure to like and subscribe and come out and see us. We'll be here for